Rain poured heavily on that fateful evening in September 2008, creating a gloomy atmosphere that matched the events about to unfold. 8-year-old Sarah Chen sat at the dining table of their modest suburban home, carefully coloring within the lines of her favorite coloring book while her 6-year-old brother Michael played with his toy cars on the living room floor. Their mother, Linda Chen, glanced at the clock for the 5th time in the past hour. Her husband, James Chen, was running late from work again. She had already called him twice, but he insisted he needed to stay back to complete some important paperwork. Something about irregularities in the company's financial records that he had discovered. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming home?" Sarah asked, looking up from her artwork. "He promised to help me practice for my piano recital." Linda forced a smile, trying to hide her worry. "Soon, sweetheart. Daddy's just finishing up some important work." She walked to the window, watching the rain grow heavier. Lightning flashed across the sky, followed by a loud crack of thunder that made Michael jump. "I'm scared," Michael whimpered, clutching his favorite blue toy car close to his chest. Just then, Linda's phone rang. It was James. "Linda, I need you to come to the office right away," he spoke in a hushed, urgent tone. "I found something serious. I don't trust anyone else with this information." Linda looked at her children, then at the storm outside. "James, it's pouring. Can't this wait until tomorrow?" "No, it can't. Please, bring the kids if you have to. This is important." 20 minutes later, Linda bundled Sarah and Michael into their family sedan. The windshield wipers worked furiously against the downpour as they made their way to James's office downtown. Sarah held onto her coloring book while Michael had fallen asleep in his car seat, still clutching his blue car. None of them noticed the black SUV that had been following them since they left their driveway. As they approached the intersection near James's office building, Linda saw her husband's figure standing under the awning of the entrance, holding a thick manila envelope. He waved at them, his face tense with worry. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The black SUV suddenly accelerated, its headlights blazing through the rain. Linda saw it coming in her rearview mirror, but it was too late. The impact sent their car spinning across the wet pavement. Sarah's coloring book flew from her hands. Michael woke up screaming. The sound of crushing metal and breaking glass filled the air. When Sarah opened her eyes, she was in a hospital bed. Her head hurt, and her arm was in a cast. Michael was in the bed next to her, looking small and scared with bandages around his head, but their parents were nowhere to be seen. A kind-faced nurse named Mrs. Thompson stood between their beds, her eyes filled with tears. "You've both been very brave," she said softly, "but I have something very difficult to tell you." The words that followed changed their lives forever. Their parents hadn't survived the crash. The black SUV had disappeared into the night, leaving no traces behind. In the days that followed, a parade of unfamiliar adults visited their hospital room. Social workers, lawyers, distant relatives they had never met, all discussing their fate in hushed tones just outside the door. Sarah tried to be strong for Michael, but she was just a child herself, struggling to understand why this was happening to them. "I promise we'll always be together," Sarah whispered to Michael one night, crawling into his hospital bed to comfort him after a nightmare. "You're all I have left." But fate had other plans. With no immediate family able to take both children, the system began its work. Their father's cousin in Seattle offered to take Michael, while their mother's college friend in Boston wanted to adopt Sarah. Despite protests and tears, the decision was made by adults who thought they knew best. On their last day together, Sarah and Michael clung to each other, neither wanting to let go. Michael's blue toy car miraculously survived the crash, passed from his small hands to hers. "Keep it safe," he sniffled, "until we see each other again." Sarah nodded, unable to speak through her tears. As they were led away in opposite directions, neither child could comprehend that this would be their last moment together for many years to come. Their young minds couldn't grasp that sometimes life's cruelest twists come disguised as necessary decisions made by well-meaning adults. The rain had started again as two cars drove away from the social services building, one heading east, one heading west, carrying pieces of a broken family to opposite ends of the country. 10 years had passed since that rainy day when Sarah and Michael Chen were separated. Life had taken them down vastly different paths, shaping them into two distinct individuals who shared only fading memories of their past. In Boston, Sarah lived with Catherine Moore, her mother's college friend who had become her adoptive mother. Their apartment overlooking the harbor was filled with the scent of Catherine's attempts at Chinese cooking, never quite matching the flavors Sarah remembered from her mother's kitchen, but the effort meant everything. Sarah, now 18, sat at her desk, staring at the worn blue toy car that she kept as her most precious possession. High school graduation was approaching, and she had just received her acceptance letter to nursing school. The achievement felt hollow without someone to share it with. "I got into the program," she told the toy car, a habit she had developed over the years. "Michael would be 12 now. I wonder if he still loves music like he did when he was little." Meanwhile, across the country in Seattle, Michael Chen had grown into a quiet, thoughtful 12-year-old. His cousin David Chang and his wife Susan had provided a stable home, but Michael always felt like an outsider. He excelled in music, finding solace in the piano, the same instrument his sister used to play. "Your sister was quite talented," David would sometimes say, watching Michael practice, but these rare mentions of Sarah only deepened the void in Michael's heart. At school, Michael kept to himself, preferring the company of his music sheets to his classmates. During lunch breaks, he would sit in the music room, playing melodies that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his memories. Lullabies his mother used to sing, tunes Sarah used to practice. One rainy afternoon, similar to the day they were separated, Michael found a box in the attic while looking for his old baseball glove. Inside were newspaper clippings about the accident, photos of his parents, and documents he had never seen before. Among them was a letter addressed to "My dearest children" in his father's handwriting. With trembling hands, he began to read. "Sarah and Michael, if you're reading this, something has happened to your mother and me. There are things at work that don't add up, numbers that don't make sense, people who aren't who they claim to be. Trust no one but each other." The letter ended abruptly, as if his father had been interrupted while writing it. Michael's heart raced as he realized there might be more to his parents' death than a simple car accident. Back in Boston, Sarah was having her own revelation. While helping Catherine clean out the storage unit, she discovered a box of old papers belonging to her mother. Inside was a diary with entries leading up to the accident. "James is worried," one entry read. "He's found discrepancies in the company's accounts. Millions missing. He doesn't know who to trust. We need to protect the children." Both siblings, unknown to each other, had stumbled upon pieces of a puzzle they didn't yet understand. But their paths, though separate, were beginning to align with a shared purpose. Sarah started researching her father's old company online, saving articles and making notes. She created a private blog, hoping that somehow, somewhere, Michael might find it and reach out. Michael began composing a psalm, pouring his confusion and newfound questions into the melody. He called it "Sister's Promise," remembering Sarah's last words to him in the hospital. His music teacher was so impressed that she entered it into a young composers competition. As the sun set on opposite coasts, brother and sister looked up at the same sky, each holding a piece of their shared past. Sarah clutched the blue toy car, while Michael ran his fingers over the letters' faded ink. "I'll find you," Sarah whispered to the stars. "I won't forget," Michael promised to the moon. Neither knew that their separate discoveries were the first steps toward a reunion that would uncover truths bigger than their own separation. The paths that had diverged 10 years ago were slowly beginning to curve back toward each other, guided by the breadcrumbs their parents had left behind. In Boston, Sarah pinned a new article to her investigation board. In Seattle, Michael tucked the letter into his music folder. Two siblings, separated by distance but connected by blood and shared loss, were unknowingly embarking on a journey that would change their lives forever. 5 years had passed since Sarah Chen discovered her mother's diary. Now 23 and working as a pediatric nurse at Boston Children's Hospital, she never gave up her search for Michael. Her small apartment walls were covered with notes, timelines, and possible connections that might lead to her brother. Every night after her hospital shifts, Sarah would sit at her computer, searching social media and public records. The blue toy car still sat on her desk, a constant reminder of her mission. Her adoptive mother, Catherine, worried about her obsession, but understood the deep void that drove her. "I found something," Sarah announced one evening during their weekly dinner. She pulled out her phone, showing Catherine the social media post from Seattle. "There's a young music teacher named Michael Chang who won a composition award. The piece is called Sister's Promise. Catherine set down her fork, studying the photo. The young man in the picture had familiar eyes, their father's eyes. Have you reached out to him? Sarah shook her head. I tried sending messages, but no response. I'm thinking of hiring a private investigator. The next day, Sarah walked into John Martinez's detective agency. The office was small but neat, with certificates covering the walls. John, a former police officer with kind eyes and graying hair, listened intently as Sarah shared her story. I've saved up $5,000, Sarah said, pushing an envelope across his desk. I need to know if this Michael Chang is my brother. John picked up the toy car Sarah had brought as evidence of her connection. This might take time, he warned. And there's no guarantee. I've waited 15 years, Sarah replied firmly. I can wait a little longer. Weeks passed as John followed leads. Sarah threw herself into her work at the hospital, finding comfort in helping sick children. One particular patient, a 7-year-old girl named Lucy, who was separated from her brother due to different medical needs, reminded Sarah of her own situation. My brother plays guitar, Lucy told Sarah during a late-night check. He sends me videos every day. Sarah smiled, adjusting Lucy's IV. My brother used to love music too. He might still do. One rainy evening, exactly like the night their parents died, Sarah's phone rang. It was John. I found him, John said without preamble. Michael Chang is indeed Michael Chen. He was adopted by your father's cousin, David Chang. He teaches music at Roosevelt High School in Seattle. Sarah's hands trembled as she wrote down the address. Is he happy? He seems to be. But Sarah, there's something else. John's voice turned serious. While investigating, I found some unusual patterns around your parents' accident. The company your father worked for, Trinity Corp, was involved in a major financial scandal the year after their death. Several executives went to prison for fraud. Sarah's heart raced. My father was an accountant there. He was trying to tell someone something the night they died. Exactly. And here's the strange part. All the evidence that brought down the company came from an anonymous source. But the timing, just months after your parents' death. Sarah looked at her investigation board, years of collected information suddenly taking on new meaning. You think my father discovered the fraud first? It's possible. And if he did? Then their accident wasn't an accident, Sarah finished, her voice barely a whisper. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She drafted and deleted dozens of messages to Michael's social media accounts. How do you reach out to someone after 15 years? How do you tell them that the tragedy that separated you might be bigger than anyone imagined? Finally, at 3 a.m., she wrote a simple email. Dear Mr. Chang, my name is Sarah Chen. 15 years ago, I made a promise to my little brother while holding his blue toy car. I still have that car, and I've never stopped looking for him. If you're who I think you are, please contact me. Your sister, Sarah. She attached a photo of the toy car and their last family picture together. Her finger hovered over the send button for several minutes before she finally pressed it. As dawn broke over Boston, Sarah stood by her window, watching the city wake up. Somewhere across the country, her brother would be starting his day, maybe checking his email, maybe still thinking about the sister he lost so long ago. I found you, she whispered to the rising sun, and this time I won't let go. What Sarah didn't know was that her email would set in motion events that would uncover not just their family's past, but a conspiracy that had changed both their lives forever. The bell rang at Roosevelt High School in Seattle, signaling the end of another day. Michael Chang, known to his students as Mr. Chang, remained at the piano in his classroom, his fingers moving across the keys as he played Sister's Promise, the composition that had won him recognition 5 years ago. At 21, Michael had become the youngest music teacher in the school's history. His students adored him, but few knew of the deep sadness that inspired his most powerful compositions. Today felt different, though. There was an unexplained heaviness in his chest, the same feeling he had on the day of the accident. You're still here, David, his adoptive father, appeared at the classroom door. He worked as the school's guidance counselor, which meant they often drove home together. Another new piece? Michael shook his head, just remembering. His eyes drifted to the old photo on his desk, the last picture of his complete family. Sarah's smile beamed back at him, frozen in time. At home that evening, Michael sat in his small home studio, surrounded by musical instruments and recording equipment. His laptop chimed with new emails, student assignments, faculty notices, and one that made his heart stop. The subject line read, "Blue toy car, from your sister." Michael's hands shook as he opened the email. The photo of the toy car, his car, stared back at him. The same car he'd given Sarah the day they were separated. He read the message 3 times, each time feeling more real than the last. "It's really her," he whispered, touching the screen where the family photo was attached. But before he could reply, another email caught his attention. This one from an anonymous sender, with a subject line that read, "Your father's legacy, to not ignore." The email contained only a link to an encrypted file and a message. "Your father tried to expose us. Now his children are asking questions. Be careful who you trust." Michael quickly closed his laptop, his heart pounding. The peaceful life he built suddenly felt like a facade. He walked to his closet and pulled out the box containing his father's letter, the one he found 5 years ago. Reading it again, certain phrases jumped out. Numbers that don't add up. People who aren't who they claim to be. Trust no one but each other. His phone rang, startling him. It was Susan, his adoptive mother. "Michael, honey, David just got a strange call about your father's old company. Someone's been asking questions." Michael looked at his closed laptop, then at the letter in his hands. "Mom, I need to tell you something. Sarah found me." Silence filled the line before Susan spoke again. "Be careful, Michael. There's something we never told you about the night your parents died." "What do you mean?" "David, your father's cousin. You received a package from your father the morning after the accident. He's kept it safe all these years, waiting until you were ready." Michael sat down heavily on his bed. "What was in it?" "We don't know. It's sealed. Your father's note said it should only be opened when both his children were together again." Michael's mind raced. The anonymous email, his father's letter, the sealed package, and now Sarah's reappearance. It couldn't all be coincidence. He opened his laptop again and clicked reply to Sarah's email. "Dear Sarah, I never forgot your promise. Every song I've written has been a letter to you. But now that you found me, I need to warn you. Someone else is watching. Dad left something behind, something important. We need to be careful. Your brother, Michael." After sending the email, Michael returned to his piano. His fingers found new notes, a darker melody than before. This piece wasn't about loss or separation. It was about truth and danger and the bonds that couldn't be broken. As night fell over Seattle, Michael looked out his window at the same stars he used to wish upon as a child. Somewhere in Boston, his sister was out there, no longer just a memory, but a real person with real questions. "We'll finish what Dad started," he promised the night sky, "together." He didn't know then that his reply to Sarah would trigger a chain of events that would put both their lives in danger. The truth their father died protecting was about to surface, and the people who had kept them apart for 15 years weren't going to let that happen without a fight. The small coffee shop in Portland, Oregon buzzed with afternoon activity. Sarah sat nervously at a corner table, halfway between Boston and Seattle, the neutral ground they had chosen for their first meeting. Her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup as she watched the door, the blue toy car safely tucked in her purse. 3 months of careful emails and video calls had led to this moment. They had agreed to meet here after discovering their phone calls were being monitored. Strange clicks, mysterious hang-ups, and Sarah's growing suspicion that someone was following her in Boston had made them cautious. The bell above the door chimed. Sarah's heart stopped as a young man walked in, his eyes scanning the room. He was taller than she expected, but those eyes, their father's eyes, were exactly as she remembered. Michael spotted her immediately. For a moment, neither moved. 15 years of separation hung between them like a heavy curtain. Then Sarah stood, her chair scraping against the floor, and Michael crossed the room in 4 long strides. They embraced without a word, tears flowing freely. Other customers pretended not to notice, giving the siblings their moment. "You're real," Michael whispered, pulling back to look at his sister's face. "I was starting to think I'd imagined having a sister." Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out the blue toy car. "Still keeping it safe, just like you asked." Michael touched the toy with trembling fingers. "I have something too." He pulled out their father's letter, worn from years of reading. But there's more. Dad left a package with Uncle David. They settled into their seats, voices low as they shared what they'd discovered. Sarah told him about John Martinez's investigation and the connection to Trinity Corp. Michael explained about the anonymous email and the strange calls his adoptive parents had received. "Someone doesn't want us digging into this," Sarah said, showing Michael her notes on her tablet. The private investigator found that 3 other Trinity Corp employees died in accidents the same year as Mom and Dad. Michael leaned forward. "The package Uncle David has, Dad's note says it can only be opened with both of us present. I think whatever evidence he found is in there." A man in a business suit at the next table seemed to be typing on his laptop, but Sarah noticed his fingers weren't moving. She casually took out her phone, typed a message, and showed it to Michael. "We're being watched." Michael nodded slightly, understanding. He'd noticed too. "Remember that park we used to visit?" he said loudly. "The one with the duck pond? We should go there for old times' sake." Sarah played along. "That would be lovely. Let's go now." They left the coffee shop, taking a winding route through downtown Portland. After confirming they weren't being followed, they ducked into a small bookstore. "We need help," Sarah whispered. "Professional help. John Martinez says he knows someone, a former FBI agent who specializes in corporate fraud cases." Michael pulled out his phone, showing Sarah the encrypted file he'd received. "I haven't been able to open it, but the timestamp on it matches the day before Mom and Dad died." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Your apartment was broken into. Nothing taken, but your research board was destroyed." Michael received a similar message from Susan. "Someone tried to access your father's safety deposit box at the bank. Be careful." The siblings looked at each other, the reality of their situation sinking in. Their reunion had triggered exactly what their enemies had tried to prevent 15 years ago. "We can't go back," Sarah said firmly. "Not until we know the truth." Michael nodded. "Uncle David can bring the package to Seattle. We'll meet him there." "I have 2 weeks of vacation time saved up," Sarah added. "And John's contact can meet us in Seattle too." As they made their plans, hidden in the quiet corner of the bookstore, both felt a mixture of fear and determination. The truth about their parents' death was within reach, but so were the people who had killed them. "Together this time," Sarah said, holding out her hand. Michael took it, squeezing firmly. "Together, no matter what we find." They left the bookstore separately, Sarah heading east and Michael west, but this time the distance was temporary. In 1 week, they would meet again in Seattle, ready to open their father's package and face whatever consequences came with its contents. Neither noticed the woman in the red coat who photographed them as they left, nor the text she sent. "The Chen children are reuniting. Initiate protocol silence." Rain pelted against the windows of David Chang's Seattle home, eerily similar to the night that had changed everything 15 years ago. Sarah and Michael sat at the dining room table, staring at the sealed manila envelope their father had left behind. David and Susan hovered nearby, while John Martinez and his FBI contact, Agent Lisa Warren, stood watching intently. "Are you ready?" Michael asked, his hand resting on the envelope. Sarah nodded, placing their father's blue toy car on the table, their lucky charm. With trembling fingers, Michael broke the seal and carefully emptied the contents. Inside were USB drives, photographs, and a thick stack of documents. But what caught their attention immediately was a letter dated the day before the accident, addressed to the Board of Directors, Trinity Corporation. "Dad was going to expose them," Sarah whispered, scanning the letter. He found evidence of massive environmental violations. They were dumping toxic waste and falsifying reports. Agent Warren picked up one of the USB drives. "This could be enough to reopen the case. The statute of limitations on corporate fraud hasn't expired." As they examined the documents, a series of photographs fell out. They showed industrial sites, secret meetings, and spreadsheets with highlighted numbers. But one photo made Sarah gasp. Their mother was in it, standing next to a man they recognized from recent news headlines. "That's Robert Maxwell," John Martinez said grimly. "Current CEO of Trinity Corp. Back then, he was just a senior executive." Michael studied the photo closely. Mom looked scared. This was taken just days before. Before he could finish, David interrupted. "There's something else you need to know." He left the room and returned with a worn journal. This was your mother's. She left it with us the day before the accident. Sarah opened the journal with shaking hands and read aloud. James discovered something terrible. They've been poisoning communities for years. Robert threatened our children today. Said accidents can happen to anyone. We're going to the FBI tomorrow, but first we need to make sure the evidence is safe. They never made it to the FBI, Agent Warren said softly. The accident was arranged to stop them. Michael stood up abruptly, pacing the room. Why didn't you tell us this before? He demanded of David and Susan. To protect you, Susan replied, tears in her eyes. They were watching us. We couldn't risk. A sudden crash from outside made everyone freeze. Agent Warren drew her weapon, moving swiftly to the window. We got company, she warned. 3 men in the backyard. John Martinez quickly gathered the documents. We need to move. Now. The basement, David said urgently. There's a tunnel from the Prohibition era. It leads to the neighbor's property. As they hurried downstairs, they heard the sound of breaking glass upstairs. Sarah clutched the blue toy car and their mother's journal while Michael grabbed the USB drives and their father's letter. Split up, Agent Warren commanded. John, take Sarah through the tunnel. I'll go with Michael and his parents around the back. We'll meet at the safe house. Sarah grabbed Michael's hand. We just found each other. And we'll find each other again, he promised. Like we always do. They heard footsteps above them. Time was running out. Remember the lullaby Mom used to sing? Michael whispered quickly. Use it as a code. 3 notes means you're safe. Sarah nodded, fighting back tears. They hugged briefly before being pulled in opposite directions. As Sarah followed John through the dark tunnel, clutching their precious evidence, she heard shouts and a scuffle above. She wanted to turn back, but John urged her forward. Your brother will be fine, he assured her. Agent Warren is the best. They emerged several houses down, into the rainy night. As they hurried to John's car, Sarah looked back at her uncle's house. No lights, no sounds, just darkness. She touched the toy car in her pocket and whispered, Stay safe, little brother. Miles away, in a moving car with Agent Warren, Michael hummed their mother's lullaby, praying Sarah would be able to respond soon. The USB drives felt heavy in his pocket, the weight of truth their parents had died protecting. Their reunion had lasted less than an hour, but it had revealed everything. Now they were separated again, but this time with purpose, with understanding, and with the means to finally bring justice to their family. The rain continued to fall as 2 cars drove in opposite directions through Seattle's dark streets, carrying pieces of a puzzle that had taken 15 years to start solving. The truth about Trinity Corporation was finally emerging, but at what cost? 3 days had passed since Sarah and Michael were forced to separate again. Sarah sat in a small motel room outside Portland, watching John Martinez examine their father's documents on his laptop. Their mother's journal lay open beside her, its pages revealing more secrets with each reading. Listen to this, Sarah said, running her finger along a faded entry. Mom wrote that Robert Maxwell visited our house a week before the accident. He offered Dad a promotion if he'd destroy the evidence. John looked up from his screen. The USB drives confirm everything. Trinity Corp wasn't just dumping toxic waste, they were covering up debts in multiple communities. Your father found the connection. Sarah's phone buzzed. 3 short musical notes. Michael's signal. She quickly sent back the same pattern. Their coded communication was the only safe way to know each other was alive. Meanwhile, in a cabin near the Canadian border, Michael sat with Agent Warren, reviewing photographs from their father's package. David and Susan had been moved to a separate safe house after the attack at their home. Look at this, Agent Warren pointed to a series of dates. Every major environmental disaster linked to Trinity Corp happened exactly 3 months after your father flagged suspicious numbers in their accounts. Michael studied the timeline, and the accidents that killed other whistleblowers, they'd all happened on rainy nights. Just like your parents. Agent Warren nodded grimly. They crafted a pattern to make each death look like a tragic accident. Sarah's next discovery came at midnight. Hidden in the spine of their mother's journal, she found a small memory card. John quickly encrypted his laptop and inserted it. Oh my God, he breathed, staring at the screen. Your mother was gathering her own evidence. She had recordings. They listened in shocked silence to their mother's voice, secretly recording conversations with Trinity Corp executives. The final recording was dated the day of the accident. "James, they're going to kill us." Linda Chen's voice trembled. "Maxwell showed me photos of the children at school today. If anything happens, the evidence is with David. The kids must stay separated until they're old enough to understand. They're safer apart." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as her mother's last words played out. John squeezed her shoulder supportively. In the border cabin, Michael received an encrypted message from Sarah. "Mom knew. They threatened us first. She and Dad chose to die protecting us." Agent Warren intercepted a concerning transmission. Trinity Corp's security team was mobilizing. Someone had accessed old security footage from the night of the accident. "They know we have the evidence," she told Michael. "We need to move." But Michael stood firm. "No more running. Mom and Dad died trying to expose them. We have everything we need now." He sent a message to Sarah. "Time to come out of hiding. Meet at place where it all began. Bring everyone." Sarah understood immediately. The intersection where their parents died, now marked with a small memorial plaque, would be their meeting point. John tried to protest, but Sarah was adamant. "Maxwell and his people think they're hunting us," she said, packing their evidence. "But we're not scared kids anymore. We're our parents' children." As dawn broke over Seattle the next morning, two cars approached the memorial intersection from opposite directions. Sarah and John in one, Michael and Agent Warren in the other. David and Susan arrived moments later with a local news crew they had contacted, witnesses to ensure their safety. Robert Maxwell's sleek corporate car appeared last, just as planned. He had taken their bait, thinking he could silence the Chen children like he had silenced their parents. But this time, the rain didn't hide any accidents. This time, federal agents emerged from every corner. This time, the truth their parents died protecting would finally come to light. As Maxwell was led away in handcuffs, Sarah and Michael stood together at their parents' memorial. The blue toy car rested at its base, a symbol of both their loss and their triumph. "Mom and Dad knew they might die," Sarah said softly, "but they made sure the truth would live through us." Michael nodded, holding his sister's hand. "They kept us apart to keep us safe, but they left us everything we needed to find each other again." The hidden truth was finally exposed, but the story wasn't over. Trinity Corp's web of corruption ran deep, and more revelations were coming. But this time, the Chen siblings would face them together, carrying their parents' courage and determination in their hearts. Above them, the rain clouds finally parted, letting sunshine touch the memorial plaque for the first time in years. 1 year had passed since Robert Maxwell's arrest. The autumn leaves fell softly outside the courthouse as Sarah and Michael Chen sat in the front row, watching the final day of the trial that had exposed Trinity Corporation's decades of corruption. "The jury has reached a verdict," the judge announced. Sarah gripped Michael's hand as they stood. Behind them sat their extended family: Catherine from Boston, David and Susan Chang, along with John Martinez and Agent Warren. They had all become part of this journey toward justice. Robert Maxwell stood emotionless as the jury foreman read the verdict. "Guilty on all counts, including conspiracy to commit murder in the deaths of James and Linda Chen." Tears flowed freely as Sarah and Michael embraced. 15 years of separation, loss, and uncertainty had led to this moment. Their parents' sacrifice had not been in vain. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around the Chen siblings. Michael spoke first, his voice steady and clear. "Today isn't just about our parents. It's about every family hurt by Trinity Corporation's actions, every community poisoned by their greed, every voice they tried to silence." Sarah added, "Our parents knew the truth might cost them their lives. They believed justice would prevail. They trusted that someday their children would finish what they started." Later that evening, the entire family gathered at David and Susan's newly rebuilt home. The dining room table that once held their father's hidden evidence now displayed photographs of happy memories, old and new combined. "Look what I found," Catherine said, bringing out a dusty box from her car. "Sarah's old piano books from Boston." Michael smiled, moving to the piano in the corner. "Think you remember how to play, sis?" Sarah joined him on the bench, placing the blue toy car, now a symbol of their triumph, on top of the piano. Together, they played the lullaby their mother used to sing, the same melody they had used as their safety signal during the investigation. John Martinez raised his glass. To James and Linda Chen, they would be proud of you both. And to the future, Agent Warren added, Trinity's case has sparked investigations into similar corporations. Your parents' evidence is still saving lives. As evening turned to night, Sarah and Michael slipped away to the backyard. They sat on the porch steps, looking up at the stars. I'm moving to Seattle, Sarah announced. The Children's Hospital offered me a position, and I can't imagine being separated again. Michael grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. I found an apartment with 2 bedrooms. The spare room has great natural light for your painting. You remembered I used to paint. I remember everything, he said softly. Even the things I tried to forget, like how Mom would sing while Dad attempted to cook Chinese food. Sarah laughed. Catherine tried so hard to recreate his recipes. Never quite got it right. Susan, too, Michael added, though she makes amazing dumplings now. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the voices of their loved ones inside. The pain of their past would never completely fade, but it had transformed into something meaningful, a legacy of truth and justice. I've been composing again, Michael said. A new piece called Reunion. It tells our whole story, the separation, the search, the discovery, and finally, justice. Will you play it at the memorial service next month? He nodded. The city had decided to create a proper memorial park at the intersection where their parents died. It would serve as both a tribute and a reminder of the importance of standing up for truth. Sarah pulled out their mother's journal, now published as part of the evidence that had exposed Trinity's crimes. Sometimes I open this just to see her handwriting, to remember her voice. We'll never lose them again, Michael assured her. Their story lives on through us. Inside, Catherine called everyone for dessert. As Sarah and Michael stood to join their family, a shooting star streaked across the sky. Make a wish, Sarah said, just like their mother used to tell them. Michael shook his head, smiling. No need. Everything I wished for all those years, finding you, learning the truth, bringing justice for Mom and Dad, it all came true. They walked back inside, where their extended family waited with love and laughter. The Chen siblings had transformed their tragedy into triumph, their separation into strength, and their parents' sacrifice into lasting change. The blue toy car watched from its place of honor on the piano, a reminder that sometimes the longest journeys lead us right back home, to the truth, to justice, and to each other.